It was 11 p.m. when I had just left work and was returning home. Additionally, the commute home takes roughly 45 minutes. Most of the time, I reside miles outside of the city. The roads are largely deserted and extremely calm at all times. As soon as I begin to travel farther and nearer to my house, the rides home from work have always been fun for me. Ultimately, I thought they were relaxing and a great way to wind down. I had just turned down a side road 20 minutes from home. That leads almost exactly to my house. I've been taking this same route home for years and never had any problems before. Still, I have to admit that it was a little unsettling. Nighttime road. A thick forest encircled the route, and it was very poorly lit. Not to add that in the later hours of the night, it would frequently grow foggy, making visibility limited to a few feet ahead. However, since there are very few people using this route at night and no curves or anything, visibility is always a concern. I can make out a little flickering light through the fog a few minutes later. I was unable to determine the exact distance ahead or even the side of the road it was on. I reduced my speed, and as I approached, the light entirely went out. I think I was traveling between 15 and 20 miles per hour at this time when a little automobile emerged from the fog and stopped right in front of me. I attempted to brake, but I was already too near, and my car hit the rear. Theirs. At first, I was a little shocked by how quickly everything had transpired, but I soon realized that neither of our automobiles had sustained any significant damage. Genuinely unsure about what to do, I let them out too. Then I opened my door and stood next to my car. They were shifting around in the front seat, but I was unable to discern what they were doing. I stood staring at his automobile, taking in its age and wear, and the fact that all of the headlights were off. After a while, a man gently emerged from the automobile and approached me. He appeared to be a middle-aged male and was fairly huge based on what I could see. I decided to inquire first. "Is everything in order? You left quickly." He was behaving a little strangely, glancing around without ever looking directly at me. He responded a few seconds later. "Yes, I apologize." He was starting to bother me, and I didn't want to be out on an empty road with him by myself, so I wasn't sure how to react. I informed him that neither automobile had sustained any significant damage, so I would resume my journey home. But he told me to wait as I reached for my car door. He said he wanted to make sure there was no damage to his car before I went, so I said okay, and he stood next to mine while he examined the back bumper. Then, however, he began to circle this automobile while feigning to inspect it for damage, which was strange considering I had only lightly touched the back bumper. I watched a big figure rise from the rear seat and head for the door as he began to move to the passenger side. A man emerged through the rear door, and I quickly grabbed my car and locked it, urging the other man to stop waving at me. At that moment, I was in a hurry, so I put the car in gear and drove around them. Through the fog, I could see their lights turn on as I looked in the rearview mirror. The lights were visible to me for around 30 seconds before they gradually went out. About 5 minutes from my house, I pulled into a gas station and waited there to make sure they didn't follow me home. However, the automobile never went by. I left for home after waiting for 15 minutes. I was not sure if I was overreacting, so I chose not to call the police at the time. The more I think about it, I'm not sure what those people truly intended, but something felt wrong about the whole event. I have no idea what their strategy was, but I had a sneaking suspicion that something really bad was going to happen if I hadn't left there quickly enough. I find myself wondering, and part of me wishes I had reported the incident. What if they had given up on me so they could try enticing someone else into falling into their trap? I used to work for a small trucking firm that transported frozen goods to retail locations throughout many states. I would typically complete 3 or 4 deliveries before returning to the warehouse and going home. Occasionally, though, we would have a lengthy delivery round and end up being too far to return that day, so we would have to spend the night somewhere before returning. Usually, all I'd do was pull the truck into a truck stop, take a few hours to relax, and then resume driving. In any case, I knew I wouldn't return until quite late the following day because I had a lengthy delivery booked for that day. After getting ready, I left. Throughout the entire trip, nothing happened. After driving down and unloading the truck, I proceeded to drive back. Still, it was becoming late. Approximately 1 in the morning. I reasoned that I should take an hour or two to recover before making the entire trip back. I still had some distance to go before reaching the truck stop, as the last sign I saw indicated it was 40 miles ahead. When I'm traveling down a long, straight road, especially this late at night with no one else around, I tend to lose myself in my thoughts for extended periods. Nevertheless, I noticed a flicker in my side mirror. I could see headlights glowing directly behind the trailer when I turned to gaze in that direction, but I had no idea where the car was. This normally indicates that the vehicle is too close to the back for me to see, which puts it in my blind spot. For me to see. I kept driving at the same pace, watching for the automobile to move into the other lane so it could pass me. To my astonishment, nevertheless, he trailed closely behind me. This was starting to get to me since I knew that this guy would attack me if I broke for whatever reason. I attempted to ignore them for the remainder of the drive, though, as the truck stop was just a few miles ahead. All the way there, I finally noticed the rest area sign and began to pull in. I watch the automobile slow down a bit as I turn in my mirror, but he keeps following me into the parking lot. Sincerely, I didn't know what to believe at this point, but I reasoned that he must have wanted to yell at me because I had accidentally cut him off a while before. Me concerning it. In my years of trucking, I've encountered a lot of irate drivers, so I was kind of used to it, but I've never had someone pursue me with such fervor. I entered in, moved into the park, and opened the spot. The automobile followed me slowly and got closer and closer to the back until finally, it did. Giving up. He was getting too strange, but again, he was too close for me to notice. I exited the vehicle and proceeded to the rear to ask them some questions, but as soon as I forcefully closed the driver's door, they reversed and left. Hastily? Even though my vision was poor, I could tell it was an older man because the car was completely rusty and white. With its front bumper bars and all, it resembled one of those vintage police cars. I waited for a few minutes by the rear of the truck to make sure he hadn't arrived and that everything was locked tightly. After returning to the truck, the night turned it off. I quickly looked out all the windows to see if there were any more automobiles, and I double verified that all the doors were secured. I then reclined and shut my eyes. A loud explosion echoed through my trailer as I woke up. It was a little after 3 a.m. when I looked at my watch and realized it had been nearly 2 hours. Subsequently, there was another louder bang. I noticed a very faint shadow moving in the direction of the back when I glanced over in the side mirror. I was pretty creeped out this time. I started walking to the back, leaving the driver's door open to avoid making any noise, and I grabbed a tiny knife that I kept in the center compartment. I knelt as I approached and peered beneath the trailer. I could make out somebody leaning up against the rear of the vehicle, with their headlights off and the automobile just behind them. When I realized it, a wave of panic shot through me, and I decided to cry out to them instead of moving closer. Even though my voice was a little unsteady, it appeared to work. They hurried into their vehicle and drove away. Upon examining the rear door, it was evident that the lock had been attempted to be cut open due to numerous scratches and distinct marks. The lot was rather empty when I turned to see if any other trucks had witnessed the occurrence. I eventually just got back on the road and headed home after a few minutes. For the remainder of the trip, nothing more occurred. I had always assumed that the man was simply attempting to pilfer from my trailer, but it is clear that he was unaware that the trailer was empty and that I was returning after a delivery. In any case, it remains the most unsettling experience I had throughout my years of truck driving. And I still occasionally become paranoid, thinking that an automobile could be following me without my knowledge. Last year, I went to a well-liked performance on Chicago's South Side. As the majority of you are undoubtedly aware, that's a seedy neighborhood with a high crime rate. However, I felt somewhat safe because the performance was well attended and the tickets were extremely inexpensive. In addition, I chose to accompany a few of my pals. We all had a great time at the concert, but we knew that the drive home would be difficult due to the heavy traffic. When we finally left the parking lot and turned onto the main road, it was almost 10 p.m. We quickly understood that we would be spending a considerable amount of time on this route because the cars were scarcely moving. While we sat there, my companions began researching alternate ways to return to our town, and they discovered one that would be able to avoid the heavy traffic. We decided to attempt the other route after spending 30 minutes essentially in the same area. As soon as we could, we left the main route and started traveling via residential streets. It was surprising how many individuals were out this late at night, either strolling or standing in their yards. Our home was only a few hours to the west, so this wasn't typical for the area. As we kept driving along these residential streets, we saw that the people outside would watch us go by. It also dawned on us that we hadn't seen another automobile in maybe 20 minutes. We were struck by this. We all became a little more focused and apprehensive. While my companion was looking through the map to find the closest main road, I asked another friend to point out a car at the end of the street we were on. It was sideways parked, obstructing both traffic lanes. I immediately parked the car, backed out, and returned to the usual route. Proceed down there after that. We started to become a little panicked and started looking for a safe way in a more populated area where there were other cars. However, a few seconds later, we noticed a sideways automobile blocking both lanes at the end of the road once more. After coming to a stop, I turned to face my friends. Without knowing what to do, we were all staring at one another. We didn't want to approach the automobile because it was too dark and we couldn't tell if anyone was inside. Two males approached us as we were talking about our possibilities from one of the houses across the street. Yes. One of them approached my window, while the other stood behind the car. He hurriedly motioned for me to roll down the window with his hands. I only rolled it down a couple of inches. After giving each of us a glance and glancing around the car, the man asked me where we were going. I answered, just back to the highway. With a nod, he turned to face his friend, who was making his way to the passenger side. For a brief period, it seemed as though everything fell silent and no one was moving. Abruptly, the two men seized the doors and attempted to open them. As everyone was screaming, "Lee," I reacted as quickly as I could and placed the car in reverse. The man attempted to put his arm through the window gap and briefly became trapped just as I was about to back out. I dragged the automobile back before crashing into the earth. After turning around, I walked back the way we had come and floored it out of the roadway. We were all stunned. I was shivering violently, but I was trying to remain calm. We all decided to simply get back on the highway and travel the same route as before. Although I believe I handled the issue rather effectively, I believe we were all really shocked by it. Fortunately, our doors were secured, or otherwise, I doubt I would be here at this moment.